Days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you, you give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
To pull this off in basically 3 weeks, I know a lot of this was already planned, but the switch of candidates at the top of the ticket, and now Walz and his beautiful family, there were speakers that had to be bumped and people that had, it was quite a production. I've said many times, whoever put it all together deserves an Emmy, because from a watcher sitting home, the production was not flawless, because I'm sure there were mistakes or whatever. It was amazing.
Noticeable flaws.
It was amazing.
There were a few things that kind of didn't quite go the way they wanted to, as is common, but they were able to keep it going and keep it moving. There was not a lot of dead space when there was, when we were between speakers, there was a DJ, there was music playing, and that party atmosphere, absolutely, you could feel it in the stadium. It was such a party atmosphere. You felt like you went to a rock concert when you were done. You know how exhausted you are?
Yes.
The energy that you put out emotionally at a good concert. Well, that's what it felt like when you left the place. You were just exhausted from the emotions that just kept coming and coming and coming. And it had, it's so funny for me to hear legacy media talking about, well, it was kind of thin on policy, where everybody in the room felt like it was very rich in policy. We learned the policy that they want to pursue on guns, the policy they want to pursue on healthcare. We learned about, obviously, choice. That was a very key issue. They keyed in on that, and it was very poignant. It was well done. I understood what they want to do on climate. I understood what they wanted to do. I'm like, what do you mean thin on policy? She's not getting up there saying, I'm going to cut inflation by 50% and just leave it at that. Like, why is it only us that have got treated like political adults? Like, only us need to actually back up what we say and have statistics and evidence. Their side can just spew 162 lies in one speech, and it just be like, oh, well, that's just how they do it.
That's just who they are. Yeah. And I think what you're saying is really important, because I've been getting in it with people on YouTube in the comments or whatever. And the big thing is, what does she stand for? Why didn't she do this? We saw this with Jermaine Dupri as vice president. And I was like, what did Dick Cheney? Well, we know what Dick Cheney actually did a lot as vice president. That was all horrible, by the way. But Dan Quayle, Biden, when he was vice president, what was his agenda? Pence, what was Pence's agenda? And why was he never required to put Trump in check or do something that Trump, you know what I'm saying? It's very weird to me that there's this bar set for Kamala Harris that was not set for any other vice presidential person in the history of America in terms of them doing more. The vice president has two jobs: to step in if the president can't, and that's it. I think it's one job.
No, there's a second job.
That's the job. What's the job?
The second job is to
constitutionally.
No, there's three jobs, right? To step in if the president is incapacitated or out of the country.
Whatever. This is right. Yes. Right? Okay.
Second job is to serve as a tiebreak in the Senate, if that is the makeup of the Senate, which she did to a perfection.
She did that record numbers. Right? So a lot of the laws that got passed were passed because Kamala Harris was the deciding vote. So I think it was like 51 times or something ridiculous.
To advance the president's agenda, both at home and abroad, be it by calling members of Senate to get legislation and members of the House to get legislation passed, or be it to be a surrogate on international trips, or be it to deal with major contracts or things that we want to get done with the military, whatever. So her job is to be his helpmeet. That's why it was important for Barack Obama that Joe Biden was a senator that was well respected, because it was that diplomacy within the Senate that helped pass Obamacare, right? Joe Biden was really critical to that. His relationships within the Senate was really important to that. Kamala's relationship within the Senate was also helpful to Joe Biden, because he couldn't be everywhere at one time, right? So she helped carry his water, but her job is to implement his agenda. It is not to implement her agenda on his watch. That's
Correct.
not what a vice president is meant to do. And quite frankly, when it comes to choosing a vice president, it is wise to avoid those who are personally ambitious in a way that could undermine the interests of the president. Right.
Right.
So for that purpose, she was cast as second fiddle and played second fiddle. And people are always like, well, what does she do? What does she do? She's doing exactly what she needs to do if you're not hearing about it. Because trust and believe, if you're hearing about her, it's never in a good way. If you're hearing about what a vice president is doing, it is not good for the president and is usually a sign of acrimony within the team. Doing something that's embarrassing the president. When we heard about Dan Quayle, it was because he was saying things and doing things that embarrassed the president.
Not being able to spell.
Yeah, like he just made it look bad. So
Yeah.
you're not supposed to hear what the VP is doing unless the VP is carrying the water of the president, advancing the interests of the president. Joe Biden was actually kind of slapped on the wrist by some people. I don't know whether Barack himself or not, when he got ahead of the gay marriage thing and said, I support gay marriage before Barack Obama himself said that. And some people say that Barack kind of came around because Biden was out of it. Right. I'm not sure if that is or is not true, but that's certainly, it is unusual to hear a vice president make a pronouncement on a major policy issue before the president does. And so anyway, I think we held her to a higher standard. I also think that she has evolved a little bit, right? She is a different person, a different candidate than she was in 2016 and when she was in
2020. She wasn't a candidate in
2019. When she emerged in the primary in 2019, she's a different person than she was back then. But back then, her primary objective was to be taken seriously as a candidate. And as a Black female candidate, I can tell you what the pressure is to be seen as having gravitas and to have strength and to have clarity. You can't be joyful when you're out there because that's taken as weakness, that's taken as unseriousness. But now she has so much under her belt, and it was so kind of unexpected the way this all went down. She decided to just say, hey, I'm just going to be me at this point. She has more confidence in herself, and she just entered at a point where what the country needed was joy and energy, and she wasn't being challenged by somebody collaterally. She wasn't being challenged by Manchin or Ryan or like Seth Moulton or any of the names that were being floated. She wasn't being challenged by them. So she didn't have to have her backup. And because she didn't have to have her backup, the real Kamala started to show and shine through. And it's very effective.
I was going to say more than evolving, she stepped into herself and to her purpose and we're getting to see her in her fullness because we wear the masks. We have to wear the mask in these spaces where people are intimidated by our very presence. We have to sometimes placate and self-deprecate or rear up in ways that we might not rear up in. And we are getting to see a lot of her humanity through, her family, but also through herself. And I think it's a beautiful thing, and we should. Let me correct myself. She broke the tie 33 times. 33 times she was the Senate decisive vote. It broke a 200-year record for tie-breaking votes from a vice president. And that's primarily because of how divided this nation is. And you think about all of the things people want to get done, they only get done when people go to Congress to create laws, which happens in Congress.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right